There comes a moment in every person's life, a moment not of triumph, but of unbearable stillness when the noise of the world fades and you're left alone with a reflection you can no longer lie to. The lights dim, the applause dies, the masks slip, and the truth you've outrun your entire life stands in the doorway like a silent executioner. It's not dramatic, it's not poetic, it's terrifying, because in that instant, you realize that the greatest deception wasn't the one the world played on you. It was the one you engineered for yourself. And that is where the road to authenticity begins. Not with beauty, not with inspiration, but with betrayal. The betrayal of every version of you that was built for approval, applause, and survival. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But he never told us how painful it would be to find that why. He never said that the pursuit of truth, the real kind, the one that strips skin from soul, would first feel like dying. Because authenticity isn't the feel-good virtue social media turned it into. It's not self-expression, it's self-annihilation. It's the ruthless process of demolishing everything you've ever pretended to be, so you can finally stand on the ashes of your own illusions and say, This is me. But who is that? Who are you without your scripts? Without the roles? Without the compulsive need to be liked, admired, or even understood? You see, we're not born authentic. We're born raw and then conditioned. We're taught to trade pieces of ourselves for belonging. A little honesty here, a little instinct there, sold off for a sense of safety in the tribe. And somewhere in that slow dismemberment of the soul, we forget what we really are. We become like well-trained actors on the stage of the acceptable, mastering every line but forgetting who we were before the curtain rose. Nietzsche didn't fit into the world. He didn't want to. He saw the polite facades of society as lies that insulated people from reality. He believed that most live in bad faith, not out of malice, but out of fear. The fear of the void that stares back when you scrape away the comfortable stories. The fear of being exiled from the herd. But Nietzsche's secret, the one buried in the marrow of his madness, is this. The only path to real freedom is brutal honesty, not just with others, but with yourself, especially with yourself. And that's the hardest part. Because self-deception is warm, it's familiar, it tells you you're doing just fine, it tells you to stay comfortable. But Nietzsche looked that comfort in the face and spit on it. He understood that becoming who you are is not a process of addition, it is one of subtraction. It's a death. 1,000 small deaths of the false self. This is why the journey toward authenticity feels like madness. Because it breaks you out of consensus reality. You begin to question everything. Why you believe what you believe. Why you do what you do. Why you dress the way you dress. Talk the way you talk. Chase what you chase. You realize most of your life was written by people who are no longer in the room. Parents, teachers, culture, trauma, algorithms. And beneath all of that noise, there's silence. A silence that doesn't comfort, it confronts. It asks you, what do you actually want? And if you're brave enough to answer honestly, the entire scaffolding of your existence might come crashing down. Most people flinch. They retreat. They double down on the mask. But if you're one of the rare few who chooses the path of truth, who chooses to burn every comforting lie, you begin to wake up. Not in the romantic sense, not in the I found my passion sense, but in the cold, unforgiving light of your own unfiltered reality. You start to see how much of your suffering came from trying to be someone you never were. You start to see how much energy you wasted maintaining an identity built on the approval of people you don't even respect. You start to see the cage you mistook for your personality. And then if you're willing to keep walking, you reach something terrifyingly pure. The realization that authenticity is not who you are. It's who you're willing to become once the lie dies. To stand in that raw, unguarded space where everything that once protected you has crumbled is to feel naked in a world that worships armor. And this is the paradox. The more real you become, the more resistance you face. Because authenticity is not convenient. It doesn't fit well into the frameworks of polite society. It doesn't play nice. It doesn't go quietly. When you decide to be brutally honest with yourself, you begin to threaten the fabric of every false agreement around you. You no longer nod along to conversations soaked in pretense. You no longer smile just to smooth the tension. You no longer contort your truth just to preserve comfort. And in doing so, you become radioactive to the people who are still clinging to the lie. This is the cost Nietzsche understood. That to be free, truly free, you must be willing to be hated, misunderstood, alone. Not because you are cruel, but because you refuse to participate in the daily theater of inauthenticity. Most people want honesty only in doses small enough not to disturb their sleep. But the kind Nietzsche spoke of the kind that births the Übermensch, the self-created soul. It is not gentle. It is not soft. It is a furnace, and everything false in you must burn in it. What makes this path unbearable for so many is not the pain, it's the clarity. Because once you see through the illusion, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to the job you hate and pretend it matters. You can't go back to relationships built on codependency and smile like it's love. You can't go back to distracting yourself with dopamine hits and call it a life. You are forced, often against your will, to confront the vacuum. And the vacuum does not offer easy answers. It offers space. Space in which you must build something real or go mad in the silence. And this is where most retreat. They rush to fill the void with noise, a new belief system, a new identity, a new label to cling to, anything to avoid sitting in the unbearable freedom of their own mind. But Nietzsche dared us to do the opposite. He dared us to remain in the fire, to resist the cheap narrative, to endure the death of certainty. Because only through that destruction do we make space for the genuine, for a life not inherited but forged. There is no template for authenticity. It is not a personality type. It is not an aesthetic. It is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is a sacred violence, the tearing down of internal walls that no longer serve. It is looking at the smiling face in the mirror and asking, what part of you is still pretending? And then having the audacity to let that part die. And yet the irony is this: the more you kill the lie, the more alive you become. Because there's something extraordinary that happens in the ruins, in the silence after the scream, in the quiet after you stop performing. You begin to hear a different voice, not the voice of fear, not the voice of culture, but the quiet, defiant whisper of the real self, the one that has waited in exile your entire life. It doesn't speak in slogans. It doesn't shout. It waits. It watches. And when you finally clear enough space for it to breathe, it says, now we begin. But beginning doesn't mean comfort. It doesn't mean joy. At least not at first. It means waking up to the weight of your own choices. It means carrying responsibility for the life you create, not the one handed to you, not the one expected of you, but the one born of raw intent. And responsibility is a heavy thing when you can no longer blame your parents, your culture, or your past for who you are. That is the true meaning of freedom, when the excuses vanish and what's left is your will and your willingness to shape the world with it. Nietzsche knew that we are not fixed beings. We are processes, becoming. We are capable of constant transformation if we are courageous enough to reject the safety of false identity. The Übermensch was never about power over others. It was about mastery of the self. The kind of mastery that comes from knowing exactly who you are because you've been willing to walk through hell to find out. Most people want change, but they don't want transformation. Because transformation means loss. It means burning the bridges to the self that was tolerated, but never truly lived. It means letting go of every narrative that kept you small and stepping into the terror of the unknown. And yet, what waits on the other side of that terror is something holy, something sacred. Not the perfection of the self, but the acceptance of it. Flawed, wild, whole, real, not polished for the world, but formed in defiance of it. Realness has a price. And that price is everything that isn't. You will lose friends. You will lose comfort. You will lose the false peace that came from playing the expected role. But what you gain in return is something infinitely rarer. A life that is actually yours. A life not dictated by inherited fear or borrowed values, but carved moment by moment from the granite of your own truth. And when you live like that, really live like that, you stop needing to prove anything. Because you are no longer performing. You are being. That is the silent revolution of authenticity. It doesn't scream. It radiates. It doesn't demand to be seen. It makes everything else look hollow by contrast. But don't mistake this for some blissful enlightenment. Being real will not save you from suffering, it will intensify it. Because the moment you drop the mask, you start to feel again. Fully. Every heartbreak, every failure, every echo of the lies you once told yourself, it all returns. Not to punish you, but to purge you. Because emotions, when felt in their rawest form, are not enemies. They are teachers. They reveal the limits of who you used to be and the contours of who you might become. Nietzsche called this becoming what you are, not as a final destination, but as an endless process of refinement. And what is refinement, if not fire? This is why brutal honesty matters. Not because it's edgy, not because it wins arguments, but because it cuts through the fog. It forces you to see what is, not what you hope, not what you fear, just what is. And only from that ground, from that unshakable confrontation with reality, can anything meaningful begin. The lie keeps you safe, but the truth makes you sovereign. And sovereignty begins not with control, but with ownership. The courage to say, yes, this is my wound, this is my failure, this is my shadow, and I will not hide it. Because the lie festers in darkness. But the truth, even when it hurts, purifies. You begin to walk differently when you no longer have anything to protect. Not because you've become invincible, but because you've made peace with your own fragility. You've made peace with the truth that everything you are, your strength, your madness, your pain, your fire, it's all part of the same flame, and you will no longer apologize for burning. Most people are haunted not by the things they've done, but by the selves they abandoned. The art they never created, the words they never spoke, the lives they never lived, because deep down, they knew what was real. They knew, but they let fear silence it. They let comfort sedate it. And in doing so, they betrayed the one thing that could have set them free. But not you. You, standing at the edge of this precipice, feel it. That thrum beneath your skin, that ache that says, there's more, there's something deeper, there's something truer waiting. And it's not out there. It's not in a book, not in a guru, not even in Nietzsche. It's in you, beneath the roles, beneath the trauma, beneath the addiction to certainty. It's been whispering to you all along. The voice of the authentic self is quiet because it has nothing to prove, but it's relentless. And once you hear it, truly hear it, you can't go back to sleep. You can't pretend anymore. Because the soul, once awakened, is a fire that refuses to be put out. And so you walk, with no map, no script, no applause. Just the sound of your own footsteps echoing into a future that no one can define for you. You walk not because the road is clear, but because it's real. Because it's yours. Because even if it costs you everything, it gives you something the lie never could. Yourself. That is Nietzsche's secret. Not the Übermensch, not eternal recurrence, not will to power. The real secret is that truth, is a holy violence, a sacred rebellion. And only those willing to break themselves open will ever feel what it means to be free. So if you must walk, walk naked into the storm. Speak the words you're afraid to say. Burn the masks you've outgrown. Let them call you mad, arrogant, extreme. Let them project their fear onto your name. Because the world has enough cowards wrapped in charm. What it desperately needs is one soul willing to be seen without illusion. One soul that refuses to trade truth for safety. One soul that chooses to live, fully, brutally, honestly. You were not born to be liked. You were not born to be understood. You were born to become real. So die to every lie you've ever told yourself and rise, not as a brand, not as a role, not as a story, but as a force, as something true.